I have to be honest with you, I've been finding it difficult to maintain the enthusiasm for this endeavor, to post videos on YouTube. And that's not because I don't believe in what I'm saying. I do believe in what I've heard, and I do believe that it's beneficial, but it's difficult to see the direct benefit that can be derived from me sitting here and just talking into my own echo chamber. I mean, to start off with, I'm not learned, and I'm not realized. I'm just somebody who has the good fortune to meet an authentic teacher in this life. And not only that, I've spent many years in retreat, so I've done a lot of practice and I've studied a lot of spiritual terminology. Last night, then a young man by the name of Naveen Mohanty, he asked me if I would explain a little bit about how to generate bodhicitta, and this renewed my enthusiasm for this endeavor. And that's because there is nothing more important than bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the absolute essential key point to all spiritual practice. I have to be frank with you, because although I have the greatest respect for spiritual practitioners who engage in other paths, for example, Hindu yogis, etc., in fact, anybody who's willing to dedicate their time and their life to spiritual progress, but for me, then I would never engage in this path of silence, this pursuit of personal peace. And that's because this isn't a particularly high or profound motivation. In fact, every creature, right down to the smallest worm, is only looking for its own benefit and well-being, and to avoid personal suffering. But bodhicitta is this wish, this love and compassion for others, this wish for others to achieve supreme awakening. Bodhicitta is described as this loving kindness, compassion. And what do we mean by love? It's not worldly or mundane love. Love means the wish for another to experience well-being and happiness. But in the Mahayana, the greater vehicle, it's not limited. This is limitless love. That means it's a love for all sentient beings. And not only that they experience happiness, but they experience the ultimate and final happiness of Buddhahood. Similarly, compassion is the wish for another to be free of suffering. But in the Mahayana, that's the wish for every sentient being, even our enemies, not to experience suffering. And not just to be free of mundane suffering, but to be completely free, to find complete freedom from suffering and ultimate liberation. Now, why is bodhicitta so important? The reason why bodhicitta is so important is because it is the direct cause for ultimate and supreme awakening, the state of a completely enlightened Buddha. But it's not just any old love and compassion that will lead to the state of Buddhahood. It's ultimate bodhicitta. To quote the noble Nagarjuna, "If I and other worldly beings yearn for supreme awakening, the root of this is the awakening mind, as stable as the king of mountains, a compassion that embraces all, and wisdom independent of duality." So this isn't ordinary compassion. This is ultimate compassion. This is compassion embraced by emptiness, or non-dual wisdom. And the problem here is that ordinary beings can't give rise to this ultimate bodhicitta. We don't understand the ultimate meaning, the true nature of reality. But it's not like all hope is lost, because there is a path for us. In order to give rise to ultimate bodhicitta, we need to first give rise to relative bodhicitta. And that's because once we give rise to relative bodhicitta, that will act as a cause for the generation of ultimate bodhicitta. And so we have to work with the relative first before we can realize the ultimate. Now, this is a problem in general in the West because we think we can start at the top and work our way down. Everybody's looking for the highest view. They just want to learn Mahamudra and Dzogchen. They want to rest in non-duality, but it's not that easy. It's only an enlightened being who can understand what non-duality is. And understanding non-duality is not merely playing with a few concepts. Like if I tell you everything's non-dual, what benefit does it give you? It doesn't change your way of thinking in any way. It's not about understanding a logical argument. The generation of ultimate bodhicitta is a realization of non-dual wisdom. It's a realization of non-referential compassion free of the 8 elaborations. And our world is completely subsumed within these elaborations. The methodology that exists within the Tibetan tradition is very pragmatic. It's a very practical and usable thing. And so in order to generate this bodhicitta, we follow the practice of the 7 points of mind training. This is the seminal text on the generation of mind training that came down to us from the tradition of Lord Atisha, as taught by Chikawa Yeshe Dorje. Now in general, if you want to learn something, then you have to start from the basics and work your way up. And the problem is, in the West, we all want to start at the top and work our way down. If you want to learn language, then you start with the ABCs, some basic vocabulary and basic grammar, and then work your way up. And it's the same with spiritual practice. And so, as it is taught, we work with what is easier. And in the Tibetan tradition, then they use the mother of this life as the focus for their practice. Now there is a problem here because many Westerners don't even like their parents. They may not have even known their mother. They may have been adopted, for example, or abandoned at a young age. But this is not really a problem for Easterners. Let's take, for example, a young child from a remote village in the Himalayan mountains who is separated from his family to go to the monastery. And even though they were separated from their parents at a very young age, when they do this kind of practice, they still use their principal mother of this life as a focus. And that's not because they had been treated well by their mother or spoiled by them, or they had this great attachment for them. It's because they recognize that on the basis of their mother having carried them in the womb, that they were born into this world and they have come to meet the Buddha Dharma. They have a chance of liberation. So if this is difficult for you, then you don't have to use your blood mother. You can use whoever you see as having been the most kind to you. It could be your foster parents. It could be some other figure in your life. But it has to be the person that you see to have been the most kind to you in this life. So we start off with recognizing our mother, identifying who this person is. Whether it's your mother or it's another figure, you identify them. And you have to have a very clear idea of who this person is and just why they are most gracious to you in this life. And so when it comes to our primary mother of this life, we think about all the hardship that she had to endure in order to carry us in the womb. And so we're able to imagine these kind of difficulties that a mother goes through in order to carry a child. For example, they experience nausea. They have to be careful about what they eat. If you're a mother and you like to drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes, you have to give these things up. You have to give these things up for your child. So out of love for your child, then you change your habits and you undergo hardships. You experience hot and cold flushes and nausea. And there are many things that are associated with carrying a child that are difficult. And these are things we can imagine. And by doing this, then we generate this love for this person who has been so kind to us. Not only have they carried us in the womb, but childbirth is very painful for many people. It's difficult. It's a hardship. And so we recognize that they were willing to undergo personal suffering for our benefit. And once we're born, it's not all over because Mother continues to care for us and feed us so that we grow strong. She gives us an education and teaches us our basic linguistic skills. And by thinking in this way, then one develops a very visceral feeling of love and a very visceral feeling of gratitude towards this person who has had to undergo so much suffering for our benefit. In this way, we develop a very strong feeling of emotion or love for this mother of our life, or whoever you've chosen as that object of your meditation. So in the Tibetan tradition, in general then, we work with what is easier for us, and then move outwards towards the more difficult. So we start off by feeling this love and compassion for our mother of this life, and then those connected with us, those we don't know, and eventually we are able to generate this bodhicitta for the sake of all beings, including our enemies. And in general, again, then many Westerners have a problem with this because they're very proud. So they think, well, I'll just start with the most difficult thing. I'll just start with thinking about all sentient beings. I'll just start with having this love and compassion for my enemies. But in general, this doesn't work. And it won't help you to develop an authentic feeling of love and compassion. What we have to do is we think very intensely of everything that our mother has gone through for us. We think very intensely of all the hardship our mother has gone through in order for us to be here today. And so with this, we generate a feeling of love. And then we have to generate this feeling of gratitude. Why do we need gratitude? Because on top of having love for our mother, we have to have this feeling like, I must in some way repay their kindness. And so how do we develop compassion? Well, in order to develop compassion, we have to think about the suffering of our mother or this object that you've chosen. And especially in the Dharma, then we have to think about the suffering that she has undergone for our benefit. Not only the suffering that she has undergone, but also the suffering that she will experience in the future on account of having been kind to us. This is a very difficult point for us in the West because we've become very disconnected with what exactly it means to live in the world. And what do I mean by this? Well, basically, because of our wealth and our opulence, we've outsourced everything. Now, let's just take, for example, a nomad in the plains of Tibet. If they want to get clothing for their child, they either have to kill an animal and use those skins in order to clothe that child, Or they sell the skins to buy, let's say, food like grain or cloth to make clothing. And so, in order to feed us, in order to care for us, then that individual has to create negative karma. They have to create the causes for their own suffering in future lifetimes in order for us to thrive and survive. And the more they do that, the more love they have for us, then the more negativity they create. And you may think that that's not relative in the modern world, but it is very relevant. Because what do we do when we get through our lives? So as I said, we outsource everything these days. How do we do that? Well, our food flies in airplanes from Africa. Our clothes are manufactured in China. We drive in a car to go to the supermarket. So we think, well, I didn't have to kill a sheep. I just drove to the supermarket to buy some baby milk. But you have to understand, in all our interactions in the mundane world, we are complicit with the suffering of others. The clothing we bought from China may have been made by forced labor by Uyghurs, right? If we drive a car to the supermarket, then we're polluting the environment for others. These days, we can see everywhere the signs of climate change, the consequences of global warming. In fact, Patrul Rinpoche taught that engaging in commerce and business includes all other negativities. And it's true, because by engaging in that commerce, then we are complicit in the negativities of others. For example, if we buy meat from the supermarket, well, we didn't have to kill a sheep, but somebody did. And that person will have created negative karma. And they will have to experience the results of that negative karma in future lives, if you believe in future lives. If you don't believe in future lives, well, there's another way that you can practice. No one who is born into the mundane world can escape old age, sickness, and death. Everyone ages, everyone gets sick, and eventually we all die. And many of us will have a very personal experience of this. I mean, I came from the monastery in Nepal here to look after my parents. And my mother has Alzheimer's. And so I am experiencing the degradation of her life and her suffering. And it's painful, it's difficult. And so for me, that has become a real focus. It becomes a real visceral experience of compassion for somebody who has treated me so kindly, and she has treated me so kindly in this life. And so if I just hold on to my resentment for something that I didn't like, or something that my mother said or did when I was young, then it would be foolish. Because really, she has given everything in this life for me so that I may progress, so that I could be sitting here and talking to you about spiritual practice. And so we have to be grateful. And we have to generate this feeling like, I have to repay that. And how do we repay that? We repay that by learning the Dharma, by gaining spiritual knowledge. By gaining spiritual knowledge, we can become the people who help others. We can help to liberate others from mundane suffering. There's this young man, right? Naveen Mohanty. And he's got a few videos on YouTube. And he's really young and he's inexperienced, and actually he doesn't have a lot of confidence. Of course he doesn't have confidence because he hasn't had the opportunities to study the Dharma very much. By watching his video, I can tell you that he's very sincere and he has a very pure motivation. What he's talking about is our responsibility. It's our responsibility for future generations to make spiritual progress, to become loving and caring people. And the main reason why I know this is because he's interested in how to generate bodhicitta. And although he's young, inexperienced, he hasn't got this confidence for public speaking or education in the Dharma. And because he has understood this key point, the importance of generating bodhicitta, I can say with absolute certainty he has understood a great deal more than all these teachers online these days talking about non-dual awareness, non-separation. You're already Buddha, you don't need to practice. His motivation isn't to find personal peace or to rest in stillness. Resting in stillness is just a way to try to escape worldly suffering. The true essential point of all spiritual practice is to develop love and compassion and concern for others. I've said many times that the point of all spiritual practice is to reduce clinging, right? It's based on clinging that we suffer. And the cause for being born in the mundane world, the cause for experiencing samsara, is self-clinging, self-interest. The desire for stillness and peace is a self-concern, and that's why these practices do not lead to liberation from samsara. Where there is no clinging to self, where there is not this belief in a soul and a self, then there is liberation from samsara. But this is mere liberation from samsara. If you seek ultimate awakening, that is to achieve this state of a Buddha. The Buddha is called the Great Bodhisattva. Why is the Buddha called the Great Bodhisattva? That's because the Buddha works for the benefit of others. And if you want to achieve that, then you have to abandon all self-concern. You have to abandon clinging to the self. You have to abandon clinging to liberation for personal benefit. And ultimately, one needs to abandon clinging to anything as being real. And that doesn't mean that you should have the view of nihilism. Nothing exists, there is no thought, there is no mind. That's mistaken. That's a non-existent, nihilistic view, and it's the most dangerous view to hold. People who believe in a God, who hold the view of existence, are in a much better position than those who believe in nihilism, or believe in the view of non-existence. And that's because God teaches that you should not harm others, that you should have good conduct. Thou shalt not kill. If you follow that, that's not going to harm you. You're going to be born in heavenly realms, but it's not ultimate. But people who are nihilists are born in hell. And I don't mean someplace deep under the earth where there are cauldrons and people boiling in them. I mean unhappiness, suffering, confusion. In a world that is random, with no cause and no purpose, there is nothing but darkness. The environment we experience is a mere projection of our attitude, our outlook. And so based on our view or our outlook, then the world around us manifests. And those who have this outlook of the awakening mind, this love and concern for others, experience ultimate bliss. And those who have only self-concern to rest in the silence of personal peace will continue to experience mundane suffering in this world. I've put the link to Naveen's channel in the description below. So I'd like you to just go have a look. And if you like it, then maybe you should give him some encouragement, Subscribe to him or give him a like or something like that. Leave a nice comment. I mean, there's lots of middle-aged old guys like me who are basically jaded, who came to the Dharma too late and had very worldly lives. And so we should encourage these people who are young and who have potential. And if you want to know whether or not somebody has potential, then just look at their motivation. If they're motivated by self-concerns, they want to be happy or they want to escape suffering, that's not an authentic or sincere motivation. This authentic motivation is if they talk about benefiting others. It is our responsibility to make the world a better place for future generations, and to do this by developing awareness. And you can't go wrong there. I mean, ultimately, we want to make things better for all future lifetimes, and that means liberation from samsara and ultimate Buddhahood. But you have to start somewhere. You have to start with what's easier and work your way towards the more difficult. We can't continue to look towards the east or just imagine monasteries floating in the clouds in the olden times. We have to bring the Dharma home. We have to imagine a world in which the Dharma exists in our country, in the West. And the only way to do this is if the people of our community develop spiritual qualities. So this has been a rather long video, and I'm not going to go on anymore. There's a lot more to be said about development of bodhicitta, but I've given you a basic idea. And so until next time, see you later.